Well, greetings from Austin, Texas. It is Tuesday night, and it's time for another Bible study through the Torah. I hope you're enjoying these studies, and I know we get a little lively here on Tuesday nights, and I hope that liveliness comes through and that you're able to enjoy the study with us. We'll start off with a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for your grace and mercy and kindness and love, your generosity, and we ask you, Lord, to be pleased with our efforts to study your word and to learn tonight. Please give us of your spirit that we'll be able to have the anointing to learn your Torah, to be able to learn the lessons, spiritual lessons that you have for us in the book of Leviticus, and that we'll be able to walk away with more knowledge of you and of your grace. I ask you to be with us in the name of Yeshua the Messiah. And everybody say, Lord, I'm hungry.
Lord, I'm hungry.
I ask you to feed me.
I ask you to feed me.
And I'm thirsty, Lord.
And I'm thirsty,
Give me
Lord.
living water to drink.
Give me living water to drink.
So I'll have plenty to give to others.
So I'll have plenty to give to others.
In the name of Messiah Yeshua.
In the name of Messiah Yeshua.
Amen. Baruch Hashem. You know, we have a wonderful God. Today I sent a note out to my Facebook connections and said, the reality that you see with your eyes and you hear with your ears is not the reality of God. You cannot prove God in a scientific way by what you see or what you hear. Because invariably scientists want to come up with scientific reasons and things for discounting the miracles of God. And just like they did in Moses' day, they're still doing today. They're trying to claim that there was a big volcanic eruption and it threw hailstones and fire into the air, and that was why they had hailstones and fire. And then they said it was kind of like there was a movement of these locusts going through the land, and they were trying to clear the way for this volcanic eruption that they could feel or sense was going on, and that's a bunch of baloney. So how do you explain the fact that 100 million quail fell right in the laps of the children of Israel when they were begging for meat, and they fell right there in front of them? They pick them up and kill them and eat them, and they had so much quail that was running out their nose. And God answers our prayers. So God also, he's careful about the instructions he gives us, and he wants us to be careful about it, to carry them out the way he says. We're going to go to chapter 16, verse 1 of Leviticus 16:1, and it starts off in the normal way. Vaydaber Yahweh el Moshe Acharei Mot Shnei b'nei Aharon Bikarbatam Lifnei Yahweh Vayamutu. And that means, and Yahweh worded unto Moses, saying, I'm reading too fast. I'm reading by memory instead of by what I'm seeing in front of me. And the word of Yahweh unto Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they offered before Yahweh and died. If you remember that story, they offered strange fire before God, the fire that he did not authorize. So God is very careful about his instructions, and he has a reason for everything that he instructs us to do. And if we're not careful with those instructions, then we could be giving an opposite message to the people of what God wants to give. A lot of people are having that kind of problem today. They want to hear a word from the Lord, but then they're not happy with the word that they get from the Lord. So people are starting to make up their own little word of the Lord and trying to give it to them, and that's strange fire in my opinion. So anyway, we've got to be careful to give people what God says and not to add to it or take away from it. Amen. Okay, so that's verse 1 of our Torah parsha this week. And verse 2 says, Yahweh said unto Moses, speak unto Aaron your brother, that he not come at all times into the holy place within the veil, before the mercy seat, which is upon the ark, that he does not die, because for the cloud, in the cloud I will appear upon the mercy seat. God is not, well, let me rephrase that. God is a very private God. He doesn't like us taking him by surprise. And at the same time, he loves it when we show wisdom and judgment in taking him by surprise. Once we know the Torah and we know how he expects things to be done, we can know what's kosher and what isn't, and what God will approve of and what he doesn't. I can tell you more about that some other time, but not tonight. But I will just tell you this: God loves his children. He loves his children. And if what Nadab and Abihu did was not so wrong, God would probably have done nothing. He probably wouldn't have taken their lives. He might have corrected them. But they were doing something entirely and totally and utterly wrong. So, in this, Aaron shall come into the holy place with a bullock and a young bullock for sin offering, and a ram for the olah, for the elevation offering. He shall wear the linen coat, the holy coat he shall put on, and the breeches, the linen breeches he shall have upon his flesh. With a girdle of linen he shall be girded, and with the mitre, the linen mitre, he shall be attired in the garments, holy garments. These he shall wash therefore in water his basaro, his flesh. And the word here, he shall wash himself, rachatz. We do the rachatz on Shabbat when we have the bread and we're getting ready to share it with people. We'll wash our hands in water, and that's called rachatz because we're washing our own hands, okay, in water. And it's our flesh that we're washing, which is just our hands. We're not taking a whole bath like the priesthood would have to do, but we are washing our hands. And it says, he shall basham, he shall put them on the linen clothing that's mentioned earlier here. So it's given an order, a direction. God wants him properly clothed. He wants him to be properly representing him in his glory.
Thank you.
And he wants us to have our skin of our flesh covered. And we've had a lot of people get irritated with us, even mad at us, because we insisted that they come before God modestly. But that's the way he is. He doesn't want us to be immodest when we come before him. This is a striking difference between him, Yahweh, and the gods of Egypt and the gods of the Middle East. Because we see that the pagan goddess of Asherah, or Ishtar, Easter, the bare-breasted fertility goddess, and he despised her. He hated her for her vileness. And he did not like her exposing her body the way she does, and even in the images that the people made of her. And then calling the men of Israel to come in and have sexual relations with her so they can have children and they can have harvest of the crops and their animals will produce. And so God says, no, I'm the one. I'm the God who's going to provide these things for you, not no Asherah. Don't you worship her, because she is filthy. She's detestable to me. and I will be vengeful on those who do so. In today's society, we have a lot of voices, especially in the movies, calling us to go and worship other gods. And it's just like you got all of the witchcraft stuff with Harry Potter and all the demon gods that they revere. And then I just was looking at another movie that has so much of it, and I didn't realize how thick it was in there. I occasionally go out and buy a movie to kind of have a movie night with my wife. And this last movie I got was Jack and the Beanstalk. And man, I had no idea the heavy promotion of pagan deities they have in that movie. And it was just like they were teaching these little kids through this child's tale to worship and adore these pagan deities, these demon gods. So, oh, Lord, it's everywhere.
That's Hollywood.
Yes, it is. And of course, Hollywood's always selling sex and immorality and vulgarity. So the children of the congregation of the children of Israel, he shall take 2 kids of the goats. Ezim is goats. Shirei, the kids of the goats. L'chatat, for a sin offering, and v'ayil, a ram, echad le'olah, for it's an elevation offering. Now, all of these offerings and things that God has the priesthood do are for a purpose. He's teaching them what is expected of them when they come before him. And then when 2 of them decided they liked having the power of God so much, they're going to call down the fire of God themselves, and he burned them up with it, Aaron's children. So that's why he was so irritated with them, is because they were not supposed to be doing this. It was out of place, out of time. God had not ordered it. And so when he's so meticulous with all of these offerings and things that need to be done in a specific way, and then they go and call down or attempt to call down fire from heaven, then that was their undoing. So he says, I want 2 kid goats and a ram for a burnt offering. And Aaron shall offer his bullock, the sin offering, which is for himself, to cover or make an atonement for, ba'ado, for himself. This is often translated by himself as well. And ba'ad, and unto his house, beito. Now, Ad actually means up into himself, or up into his house. The children of Israel journeyed through the wilderness, and it says, La'ad Jordan. Okay, so it's not ear. It's It's Yardan, which is the word for river, the river of Jordan. And so anyway, more of my happy students coming in. Praise the Lord. Good evening. We're in Leviticus 16, verse 6. But Ado means literally up unto himself and unto his house. So he's making a atonement for himself and for all of his children. It reminds us of Job, doesn't it? He was offering up sacrifices for his children in case they had sinned, V'lakach, and he shall take et shnei ha'irim, hasirim, the goats, and he shall present them before Yahweh at the opening, the petach, the flap opening of the ohel, the tent of the moed, of the appointments. And he shall cast, Aaron shall cast upon the two goats lots, goralot. Goralot means lots, and what they had was they had a couple of lots that were engraved in gold, and one of them says La Yahweh and one says La Azazel. In fact, it tells us this in his verse here. Mm-hmm. So we had one was for Yahweh, and then the other lot was for Azazel. And the Azazel literally is the meaning of it is a scapegoat. The go to departure or the scapegoat. Now, I'd like to talk to you just a little about the scapegoat. This is something that the rabbis, I've never really heard a rabbi talk on that much, at least, on the scapegoat. But the scapegoat is the goat that was placed upon the shoulders of the priest and carried out of the camp of Israel up on a high mountain, and the crimson thread that was tied around its horns was to show that it was not to die. Not to die as a sacrifice. The other one had a crimson cord around its throat, and that indicated it was to be sacrificed. But the one for Azazel had the thread around the horns, and it was carried 10 miles up on a precipice, a big cliff overlooking the valley. And the priest tied off that string that was on its horns around a rock so he could prove that he was there with the Azazel. And then he shoved it over backwards down a cliff. And according to the Talmud, the the Mishnah, it tells us on Yom Kippur, it tells us that that goat would fall headlong over the cliff, and its bowels would burst forth from him, and that's the way he would die. And so when we see that in relationship to the instructions that took place in the book of Acts after Yeshua's death, Yeshua was executed by the hanging on the execution pole, and he was bled of all his blood, and he died. And that's a picture of the Olah, or the Hatat. The Hatat is an Olah offering. And then it says that Judas Iscariot, he was released, and he went out and found a place, and apparently he tried to hang himself, and maybe the rope broke. We don't know exactly how it all took place, but he fell headlong down the cliff, and his bowels burst forth just like that Azazel. And so this is a picture of something very spiritual that's taking place even in the death of Messiah and Judas Iscariot. Okay? So all of these things are too coincidental to be accidents. And these come directly from our Jewish traditions. And you wouldn't even know that part if I hadn't told you, or if someone hadn't learned it and told you. I read it in the Mishnahs where I got it. And no man told me this. God showed it to me in the Mishnah. And so when the death of the Messiah came, there was a scapegoat provided. That was Judas. Now we can see that the scapegoat has a purpose, and its purpose is to carry the demon activity in the heavenlies away from Judah, away from Israel. And so you can see this, for example, in the book of Kings when, let's see, I get the names mixed up of the prophets who were there. There's Ezekiel, Ezekiel and, I can't remember now. Sorry for the slow brain here. But anyway, Elisha and Elijah. That's the two I get mixed up. Okay, so Elisha then, after he challenged the 600 prophets of Baal, he went ahead. He ran faster than Elijah's chariot, okay? Ahab's chariot. Ahab was in his chariot trying to get back to the city. He said, you better hurry because it's going to rain and you don't want to get caught in it. And so Ahab is going as fast as he can go in his chariot. He's driving those horses up to the city of Jezreel where his throne was. And Elijah was there waiting for him, leaning on the city gate, and he was on foot. So Elijah beat him there, Elijah or Elisha. Anyway, the king went in and was telling Jezebel what Elisha had done, that he had put to death the 600 prophets of Baal. And she put a curse on him and said, may Elisha be more, this much and more also, if he is not treated the same way by sunset. Okay? So she put a curse on him. And the curse was in the form of all these demons that she worshiped. And they went and jumped on Elisha, and Elisha ran in fear. He became terribly afraid, and he ran, and this horde of demons just followed him out of the city, out of Israel. And he ran all the way back to the mountain of the Lord. That was a long ways. And then when he got there, there was a war taking place in the heavenlies. I'm telling you all this because I want you to see what goes on in the spiritual heavenly places with all of these things that we are learning. So Elisha, he's pulled all these spiritual curses and wickedness off of Israel and led them to the mountain of the Lord where the Yahweh Tzavaot fought and destroyed the hosts of heaven there that was coming after him. And so anyway, the same thing happened when Yeshua took away the sins of Israel. And of course, ultimately the whole world. They followed Judas Iscariot because he was the type and shadow of the scapegoat. And he led them out of Israel away from everything in the spirit, and then there was a heavenly war. It says that there were boulders breaking in the story of Elisha, and that the boulders were breaking and the fire was flying across the mountain and the wind was blowing, and he says God wasn't in any of these things. It was these demons. And at the end he said he heard God's voice in a still soft voice. And that's where he was complaining to God that he was alone left of all of Israel to really be proclaiming the truth and following the God of Israel. And then God says, go anoint so-and-so king and get this person and raise him up to be a prophet to follow after you and blah, 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 you know. And so he gave him a bunch of instructions, jobs to do. And that's exactly the way God has done me when I become fearful and feel like I'm no better than my own fathers who didn't even keep the Sabbath, you know. It feels that way sometimes. And God would say to me, David, do this and this and this. Oh, okay, I guess that means you're not mad at me? No. And so then I will do what God says, and I feel better afterwards, you know. Amen. So the way these two goats were selected, according to the Mishnah, the captain of the guard, which consists of priesthood, would take a little box that had the lots in it, and he would shake them up, and then he would hold them up high, and the priest would raise his hand up, his right hand up, and reach up and grab a lot. And he would not look at it. He would bring it down and show it to the captain of the guard. And the captain of guard would read the inscription on the lot. And it would either say, La Yahweh or La Azazel. Okay? So if the one that was in his right hand was for Yahweh, it was a good omen. It meant that God was going to be with us and protecting us through the year to come. But if it had the one for Azazel in it, that was a foreboding message that was not wanted, because it means there was going to be a lot of trouble for Israel in the year to come. And so that's the way the priest acted as the prophet of Israel and showed them what was going to be happening in the year to come. You find that interesting?
Yes.
Okay.
And one question, Rabbi. So today, today, how does that, is it because of Yeshua now that there's no sacrificial of the goats, or?
Well, that's
How
a
does that
very interesting question you
for today?
posed there. The Talmud tells us that, let me think about the wording that it used. "40 years after it's 40 years before the destruction of the temple." I wish I could have that pulled up here, because my mind's
okay.
not remembering stuff very well.
That's okay.
But anyway, it says that there was 40 years prior to the destruction of the temple that this stuff here that I've been telling you about the one for Yahweh showing up in the right hand, that was the most frequent one to show up in the priest's right hand. So that year by year they were being promised blessings, okay? But after that, and it turns out to be around 30 AD, our time, when that quit working. Does anybody know what happened in 30 AD? Yeshua died.
Oh, in 30 AD?
He becomes the sin sacrifice.
Okay.
Another thing that was happening at this exact same time was when they would put the crimson thread that was around the sin offering, the throat of the sin offering, on the handles of the temple, that evening when God accepted the sacrifices, that thread would turn scarlet white. It would be just plain, simple, pure white, from scarlet to white. And they believed that was a good omen for Israel too. But both of those things quit happening at the time of the death of Messiah. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how hard is it for people to get the message?
Wow. That's amazing.
It really is.
That is just,
So
Yeshua.
I'll probably be doing a teaching on this at the end of the year for Yom Kippur. Mm-hmm. And so I'll try to get a bunch of good notes together that I'll make available to people on those topics.
Amen.
Now we'll continue down. Aaron shall bring the goat which fell upon the lot to be Yahweh's and offer him as a sin offering. But the goat which fell on the lot for Azazel shall be presented alive before Yahweh to make an atonement upon him, and shalach to send forth. I went too far. To send forth him. It's done to him. He sent forth the scapegoat, Hamidbarah, to the wilderness. And of course, if you look at this word here in Hebrew, I've got it highlighted for you on the screen. It says it ends with a feminine ending, hamidbarah. So the midbar here in this case has a feminine ending on it. And the reason for that is because it's showing the direction of travel of the scapegoat. It's being let loose to go into the wilderness. Now, early before the tabernacle and the people of Israel arrived in the land of Canaan, they didn't have the temple or the precipice or things that were used while they were in the land. So they would just turn the goat loose in the wilderness and let it suffer whatever fate it was to be. Now, if you know anything about animals and in Africa, in the Middle East, if you have a goat which really can't defend itself, it's not very self-defensible, and it's turned loose by itself out in the wilderness, it's going to die. They're going to be wild beasts and everything just come and hunt it down and kill it, because it's by itself, it's weak, it can't defend itself. So the scapegoat was let go in the wilderness, and the understanding of it is that it cannot live, it will die. So that's the nature of the scapegoat. It has the purpose, one purpose in life, and that's to die. Okay, going on into verse 11. And Aaron shall bring the bullock of the sin offering, which is for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house, his family, and shall kill the bullock of the sin offering, which is for himself. And he shall take a full censer. Okay, now the word here is milo, and it means literally a full handful of incense that's going to be burned on the altar of the incense. And he's going to have the censer and burning coals of fire from off the altar. Where do you get burning coals of fire from? From on Mizbeach, the altar. Okay? In the spirit realm, I have many uses that I use the coals of fire from the altar in the heavenly place. And I get them off of the altar because they're burning and smoking on the altar. So he takes the fire from off the altar before Yahweh and his hand full of hapanav. That's chafna. And I want to look that word up because that's unusual wording for what they're calling it. Oh, it means a fist. Okay. Chofen, fist. If I could use this pen for what it was made for, then I would be able to really mess things up. What verse were we on?
I think it is. You said 11.
Twelve.
So chapter 12. Oh, what is it? Chapter.
Verse 12.
Verse 12.
Chapter what?
16.
16. My whole book closed, and I lost my place here.
16.
Yeah, we're just barely on 16, and we got quite a bit to go because this is a double portion.
Okay, so this is Leviticus.
So we may have to, for the sake of time already, to get through the meat and potatoes of 16. The textbook that covers 16 through 20. So we're already 40 minutes in.
Oh, we won't worry about it. We'll cover whatever God wants us to cover. So anyway, so this is he takes a fistful, his whole hand clenched in the form of a fist, full of incense, and put that on the fire in his censer. And then he'd have this sweet incense beaten small and would do the same thing with them and bring it within the veil.
What does it mean when they say sweet?
Well, you know, the incense has a lot of different fragrances, and the sweeter fragrances would be like cinnamon and cloves and things of that nature. Then, you know, like hot peppers and things wouldn't be counted as sweet incense. I tell you what, when my wife starts cooking with those peppers on her stove in there, I start coughing all the way in here, you know. That's not sweet. What is that? I'm dying here.
Why are you crying?
But I know when that smell and that feeling in my throat comes that we're going to have something real tasty to eat. And it's not sweet. So anyway, he's to bring those within the veil, verse 13, in the veil rather. And he shall give the incense upon the fire before Yahweh, that it may cover as a cloud the incense of the mercy seat that is upon the testimony. And the testimony, of course, is speaking of the mercy seat. He shall take the blood of the bullock and sprinkle it with his finger upon the mercy seat eastward and before the mercy seat, and shall sprinkle seven faces and seven turnings, 7 times from the blood with his finger. And then he shall kill the goat of the sin offering that is for the people, and bring his blood within the veil. So first, he's supposed to kill the animal that's for his own sins, because whoever's doing the offering needs to be sin-free. And so he has to cover his own sins first, and then he covers for the sins of the people. So everything has a place and an order to it. And he shall go within the veil with blood as he did with the blood of the bullock, and sprinkle it upon the mercy seat and before the mercy seat. Now, I'm going to go to English, so we can try to make some more speed here for Shane's sake. I'm joking with you a little bit. So in verse 16, is it 15 or 16? I can't even see it here. Okay, it's 16. He will make atonement for the holy place because of the uncleanness of the people of Israel, and because of their transgressions and all of their sins, and he is to do the same for the tent of the meeting, which is there with them right in the middle of their uncleanness. Everybody thinks, oh, it'd be so cool to be the high priest. In fact, there's a story from the Mishnah about 2 young men that went before Hillel wanting to be taught by them. And one young man went first and said, Rabbi, please teach me the Torah while you stand on 1 foot. And he went first to Shammai, which is another leader of another school. And Shammai was known to be more rigid, more inflexible. And he took his builder square and started beating on him and said, get out of my office, you're not worthy of learning the Torah. And so he went to Hillel and said, please teach me the Torah while you stand on 1 foot. Well, Hillel raised 1 foot and said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might and all your strength, and you are to love your neighbor as yourself. And the rest is all commentary, so go learn what it says. And so he did. And then the next student came up to Shammai and he said, Rabbi, teach me the Torah on the condition that you make me the high priest. And of course, Shammai got his builder square out and drove him out of his office. You're not worthy to learn the Torah. So he went to Hillel, and Hillel dutifully sat down and began to teach him the Torah. And when he came to the part where it said that Aaron's 2 sons died from offering strange fire before Yahweh, he decided that he didn't really want to be a high priest because there was too much heavy restrictions and liability and obligation in it, you know. And so the two boys talked afterwards and said that they were both saying that it was Hillel, with his teachings of love and mercy and kindness of God, that brought them to study the Torah, whereas Shammai drove them away. And if it hadn't been for Hillel, they would have probably never learned the Torah. So that was a big honor towards Hillel. And of course, it is said that Yeshua studied the teachings of Hillel. And so, yeah, but, or else they had the same teacher as Hillel, which is probably a better point made. So, he says here, he will make atonement for the holy place because of the uncleanness of the people. Now, the priesthood were the ones who actually bore the burdens of the people in their flesh, because it's a very hard, severe work to try to stand before the God of Israel because of the sins of the people. And the priesthood is actually who kept Israel from paying the price over and over and over and over again for having broken God's Torah. So we still have the same heaviness, if you will, upon those who are teachers and leaders today. And I find that I'm constantly being, I guess you could say, disciplined would be the best word I could think of, to walk in the statutes and covenants and the Torah of God. Somebody said, well, you don't have a human being who's your overseer. I said, no, I don't. Well, that's not right. I said, I would rather have a human than who I have, because God is non-tolerant, and he expects us to walk in his statutes perfectly. And so, you know, if he chooses you and calls you, he'll give you an anointing to do it, yes. But you better, you better do it.
It's a high calling.
One time I was instructed to do something and I didn't do it, and I felt the wrath of God come down on me. And I literally started bleeding from my intestines. And I thought I was going to die. And I prayed and asked God to forgive me, and he did. But that was a miserable experience. And I knew that I had not done what God told me to do. And I don't do that anymore. If God tells me to do something, I'm going to be up and doing it before you can blink your eyes. Because I learned my lesson the hard way. I don't want none of that anymore. So, no, I don't have a man to oversee me, but I've got God, and you tell me which one would be best for you. So, in verse 17, it says, no one is to be present in the tent of the meeting from the time he enters the holy place to make atonement until the time he comes out, having made atonement for himself, for his household, and for the entire community of Israel. And this is really talking about the Day of Atonement. Then he is to go out to the altar that is before Adonai and make atonement for it. He is to take some of the bull's blood and some of the goat's blood and put it on all of the horns of the altar. He is to sprinkle some of the blood on it with his finger 7 times, thus purifying it and setting it apart from the uncleanness of the people of Israel. When he has finished atoning for the holy place, the tent of the meeting, and the altar, he is to present the live goat, and Aaron is to lay both his hands on the head of the goat and confess over it the transgressions, crimes, and sins of the people of Israel. So right here in the same verse where he's told to do it, he tells us why he's to do it. And why is he to do it? Why did he say here? Verse 21.
For the sins, right?
The crimes and sins of the people and the transgressions of the people of Israel. Mm-hmm.
On the head of the goat, and then shall send him away by the hand of a fit man.
So the confession over the goat It's what takes the sins off the people and puts them on the goat. Are you following me?
Power of words.
Yes, absolutely.
It goes off.
And it says the goat will bear all their transgressions away to some isolated place, and he is to let the goat go in the desert where he's going to die. So Aaron is to go back into the tent of meeting, where he is to remove the linen garments and put on when he entered the holy place, and he is to leave them there. Then he is to bathe his body in water in a holy place and put on his other clothes, come out and offer his burnt offerings and the burnt offerings of the people, and thus making atonement for himself and for the people. He is to make the fat of the sin offering go up in smoke on the altar. The man who let go the goat for Azazel is to wash his clothes and bathe his body in water afterwards, and that's the word rachatz. He's bathing himself and his own clothes, rachatz, in water, and afterwards he may return to the camp. The bull for the sin offering and the goat for the sin offering, whose blood was brought in to make atonement in the holy place, is to be carried outside the camp, and there they are to burn up completely, their hides, meat, and dung. The person burning them is to wash his clothes, bathe his body in water, and afterwards he may return to the camp. It is to be a permanent regulation for you that on the 10th day of the 7th month you are to deny yourselves and not do any kind of work, both the citizen and foreigner living with you. For on this day atonement will be made. This is the Day of Atonement. Okay? Mm-hmm. For on this day atonement shall be made for you to purify you. You will be clean before Yahweh from all of your sins. It is a Shabbat of complete rest for you, and you are to deny yourselves. Somebody said, "But I'm a diabetic. I can't fast. What can I do?" Stop watching TV. I mean, you know, these soap operas are about as horrible a thing as you can watch anyway. Why not say, I'm going to quit watching those on Yom Kippur? You know, you should consider not watching them anytime, but
Right.
particularly in a fast day would be a good idea to turn off all those things. And it is denying yourself when you do that. Those programmings can be very addictive. You know, one program I'm kind of addicted to is The Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah.
I love that program. They teach really wonderful spiritual object lessons in this.
Yeah, they do.
And I'll just,
The Virginian, too.
yeah.
Watch the Virginian.
So anyway, we've got some good examples out of Hollywood, how programming can be used for good. So this is a permanent regulation. The Cohen is anointed and consecrated to be Cohen in his father's place, will make the atonement. He will put on the linen garments and the holy garments. He will make atonement for the especially holy place. He will make atonement for the tent of the meeting and the altar. He will make atonement for the Kohanim and for the people of the community. This is a permanent regulation for you to make atonement for the people of Israel, because all their sins once a year. And Moshe did as Yahweh had instructed him. And Yahweh said to Moses, speak to Aaron and his sons and to all the people of Israel. This is chapter 17. Tell them that this is what Yahweh has ordered. When someone from the community of Israel slaughters an ox, lamb, or goat inside or outside the camp without bringing it to the entrance of the tent of the meeting to present it as an offering to Yahweh before the tabernacle of Yahweh, he is to be charged with blood. He has shed blood, and that person is to be cut off from his people. Serious matter. The reason for this is so that the people of Israel will bring their sacrifices that they sacrifice out in the field, so that they will bring them to Yahweh, to the entrance of the tent meeting, and to the Kohen, and to sacrifice them as a peace offering unto Yahweh. And the Kohen will splash the blood against the altar of Yahweh at the entrance of the tent meeting, and make the fat go up in smoke as a pleasing aroma for Yahweh. No longer will they offer sacrifices to the goat demons, before whom they prostitute themselves. This is a permanent regulation for them through all their generations. Also tell them, when someone from the community of Israel or one of the foreigners living with you offers burnt offering of sacrifice without bringing it to the entrance of the tent of the meeting to sacrifice it to Yahweh, that person is to be cut off from his people. And when someone from the community of Israel or one of the foreigners living with you eats any kind of blood, I will set myself against that person who eats blood and cut him off from his people. For the life of the creature is in its blood, and I have given it to you on the altar to make atonement for yourselves. For it is the blood that makes atonement because of the life. This is why I told the people of Israel, none of you is to eat blood, or is any foreigner living with you to eat blood. When someone from the community of Israel or one of the foreigners living with you hunts and catches game, whether the animal be a bird that he may be eaten, or he is to pour out its blood and cover it with earth. For the life of every creature is its blood is life. Therefore I said to the people of Israel, you're not to eat the blood of any creature, because the life of every creature is its blood. Whoever eats blood will be cut off. Anyone eating an animal that dies naturally or is torn to death by wild animals, whether he is a citizen or a foreigner, is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and he will be unclean until evening, and then he will be clean. But if he doesn't wash them or bathe his body, he will bear the consequences of his wrongdoing. This is a place where we can understand that rachatz, washing, the ceremonial washing in water, does save a person. It is in the Torah. And there are some places that people kind of take lightly in the New Testament because they don't understand it, because it doesn't make sense to them. But right here it clearly tells you that God will hold us responsible if we don't bathe ourselves after having committed a sin of eating blood.
Does that mean if we eat meat today, or like red meat?
If we eat the blood.
Like raw, where the blood's just sipping out.
Okay, let's talk about that. If we eat the blood, we are breaking a commandment of God's.
Which it could be like eating very rare meat where the blood is still seeping out.
No.
So
But
like cooking the blood.
it's talking about taking the blood. I hate to tell you this, but I had a friend that wasn't a very good friend. He slaughtered a pig, and he took a cup full of that pig's blood and drank it.
Oh, okay.
Why did he do that?
To die?
That's witchcraft. It is witchcraft.
That's a ritual.
And he believes that by drinking that pig's blood, he takes in that pig's life into him. Now, if that's the kind of life you want in you, go right ahead. But please stay away from me. Does that make sense? But there's so many poisons and toxins inside of pigs, I don't know how a person could stand to do that. It's amazing to me that the guy lived as long as he did.
Is that drinking the blood of any animal?
Yes.
That's okay.
So is this why a lot of people don't eat meat, like vegetarians?
In Israel, it's another reason. The rules are so rigid for, let me make sure I'm clear as I say this. the halakha rules for eating clean meats is so clear that unless the pig or the pig, I got the pig on my brain now, the kid or the lamb or whatever you're eating, unless it is slaughtered by a rabbi who's trained in shachat, which is the slaughter rituals and prayers, then you don't have kosher meat anyway.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
So you don't know what you're getting because you don't know how the animal died. You don't know if it was, if the blessing was said over it, dedicating it to Yahweh as a sacrifice or what. You just don't know. And I partially agree with that. However, Moses told us that these laws were not intended to be so hard that you're not able to keep them. He told us that you don't have to send someone up to heaven to get them and bring them down here for you so you can obey them. And you don't have to give anybody to go across the sea to bring the law back for you so that you can hear it and do it and obey it. But it's near you, even in your heart and in your mind and in your mouth, to obey the laws of God. And it's not that hard to do. It's just a matter of giving God his proper place and honor and following the simple steps that he gives us in the Torah, and you will be obeying his instructions, and you will be righteous in doing so. So what is his instruction? If you kill an animal out in the field to eat, you're to pour its life out on the ground and cover it with dirt, and then you may eat it. It's not not counted as a sacrifice unto Yahweh that way, but that's a way you can eat and survive out in the wilderness. So the best option is to bring it in and sacrifice it unto Yahweh. Since we don't have the temple or the priesthood today, then we have to just do the next best thing and offer our blessings to God and ask him to accept it as an acceptable sacrifice. And then we are consuming the sacrifices that are going to God because we are his servants, just like the priesthood were his servants. Are you following me? Yeah. And that's why in 1 Peter it talks about we are a sacerdotal order of priests. In other words, priests with excessive authority and power. And that we are supposed to be eating these sacrifices before God.
Which is why it's commanded on Passover to eat.
Yeah, we're commanded to eat the Passover. Absolutely. Yes.
Concerning rare and medium rare meat, does that have blood in it, or is that the protein fibers breaking down?
It better have been bled out of its blood.
Right. Doesn't the FDA, however, follow those rules?
The FDA does require animals to be bled before they're put on the shelves at your grocery market. That doesn't mean that every tiny little drop of blood that was in that animal has somehow mystically vanished, because that doesn't even happen in a kosher ritual slaughter. But they do drain every possible ounce of blood out of every speck of blood they can get out of that animal at the time of slaughter. And they also pack that animal in salt, which draws any extra fluids that are in the blood vessels. It pulls that out. But even still, if you cook a piece of meat that's been properly bled, it's still going to have red matter coming out of it, and when you cut it, and that's because the cells have liquid in them too, and it's not blood, but it's still, it looks like it could be blood, so people don't like eating that, so they burn it, they make it well done or whatever. But I don't believe it's wrong as long as the animal has been bled. I don't think it's wrong for you to eat meat that is medium or medium rare even. I don't think there's any problem with that. I do believe the Bible does teach conceptually against eating raw meat. Okay? But I think that as long as you are doing your best to obey the letter of all the things, the simple instructions of the Torah, then you're not making any error. Okay? Good.
Thank you.
Good points. Okay, chapter 18. Yahweh said to Moses, before we get going here, can I get someone to get me a glass of water? Just a glass, of water. Somebody said, oh, he doesn't believe in drinking out of plastic cups. Well, I don't like the taste of it, frankly. So I can taste the plastic in it when I'm drinking it. Have you ever noticed that?
Oh, yeah.
But I told somebody that one time, a long time ago, and they said, you can't take plastic in water when you're drinking it. I most certainly can. So I just don't like it out of plastic glasses.
Yeah. Has a different taste.
Well, we got my petrochemicals.
Have you had your daily dose of petrochemicals?
Yes, I have. It's a work in progress. He has the prerogative, that's all she said.
I have the prerogative. Yahweh said to Moses, speak to the people of Israel and tell them, I am Yahweh your God. You are not to engage in the activities found in the land of Egypt where you used to live. And you're not to engage in the activities found in the land of Canaan where I am bringing you. Nor are you to live by their laws. You are to obey my rulings and laws and live accordingly. I am Yahweh your God. You are to observe my laws and rulings. If a person does them, he will have life through them. I am Yahweh. None of you is to approach anyone who is a close relative in order to have sexual relations. I am Yahweh. You are not to have sexual relations with your father. You're not to have sexual relations with your mother. She is your mother. Do not have sexual relationships with her. You are not to have sexual relations with your father's wife. That is your father's prerogative. You are not to have sexual relations with your sister, the daughter of your father, or the daughter of your mother, whether born at home or elsewhere. Do not have sexual relations with them. You are not to have sexual relations with your son's daughter or with your daughter's daughter. Do not have sexual relations with them because their sexual disgrace will be your own. You are not to have sexual relations with your father's wife's daughter, born to your father, because she is your sister. Do not have sexual relations with her. You are not to have sexual relations with your father's sister because she is your father's close relative. You are not to have sexual relations with your mother's sister because she is your mother's close relative. You're not to disgrace your father's brother by having sexual relations with his wife because she is your aunt. You are not to have sexual relations with your daughter-in-law because she is your son's wife. Do not have sexual relations with her. You are not to have sexual relations with your brother's wife because this is your brother's prerogative. You are not to have sexual relations with both a woman and her daughter, nor are you to have sexual relations with her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter. They are close relatives of hers, and it would be shameful. You are not to take a woman to be a rival with her sister, have sexual relations with her while her sister is still alive. You're not to approach a woman in order to have sexual relations with her when she is unclean from her time of nidah. That's the menstrual cycle. You are to not go to bed with your neighbor's wife and thus become unclean with her. You are not to let any of your children be sacrificed to Moloch, thereby profaning the name of your God. I am Yahweh. You are not to go to bed with a man as with a woman. It is an abomination. There's your homosexual rule there. And you are to have not to have sexual relations with any kind of animal, thus becoming unclean with it, nor is any woman to present herself to an animal to have sexual relations with it. It is perversion. Do not make yourselves unclean by any of these things, because all the nations which I am ejecting ahead of you are defiled with them. The land has become unclean, and this is why I am punishing it. The land itself will vomit out its inhabitants. But you are to keep my laws, rulings, and not engage in any of these disgusting practices, neither the citizens or the foreigner living with you, for the people of the land have committed all of these abominations, and the land is now defiled. If you make the land unclean, it will vomit you out too, just as it is vomiting out the nations that was there before you. For those who engage in any of these disgusting practices, whoever they may be, will be cut off from their people. So keep my charge not to follow any of these abominable customs that others before you have followed, and thus defile themselves by doing them. I am Yahweh your God.
Amen. Amen. Wow. What does it mean, vomit out?
Well, the land itself will drive us out if we do not follow God's instructions. I believe that's what's happening here in the United States.
Yep, I agree.
Driving people away from the United States?
Because they're not following the laws of Torah. God gave us this land, and now we're flinging it in his face and saying we don't have to obey you if we don't want to. And now the land is starting to reject us.
Not only that, because they're also supposed to. Besides following the ways of Yahweh, you are supposed to follow the law. And all those laws are being broken right now.
Right. Every one of you is to revere his mother and his father, and you are to keep my Sabbaths. I am Yahweh your God.
To keep my Sabbath, that's so important.
Do not turn to idols. Do not cast metal gods for yourself. I am Yahweh your God. When you offer a sacrifice of peace offering to Adonai, offer it in the way that will make you accept it. It is to be eaten the same day you offer it and the following day, but if any remains until the third day, it is to be burned up completely. If any of it is eaten on the third day, it will have become a disgusting thing and will not be accepted. Moreover, everyone who eats it will bear the consequences of profaning something holy meant for Yahweh. That person will be cut off from his people. When you harvest the ripe crops produced in your land, don't harvest all the way to the corners. Now, this is a law called the payas, the law of payas. And the corner, the Hebrew word for the corners is payah. That's what it is. Payah, payot, plural would be payot. And that's why we wear the tzitzit in the corners, the payot of our tallit. Okay? That's why we don't cut the corners of our head or the beard. And he says, likewise, don't harvest all the way to the corners of your field, and don't gather the ears of grain left by the harvesters. Likewise, don't gather the grapes left on the vine or fallen on the ground after the harvest. Leave them for the poor and for the foreigner. I am Yahweh your God. Don't steal from, defraud, or lie to each other. Do not swear by my name falsely, which would be profaning the name of your God. I am Yahweh. Do not oppress or rob your neighbor, especially you are not to keep back wages of a hired worker until morning. A hired worker all night until morning. You're not supposed to keep those wages back from him. Do not speak a curse against a deaf person or place an obstacle in the way of a blind person. Rather fear your God. I am Yahweh. Amen. Do not be unjust in judging. Show neither partiality to the poor nor deference to the mighty, but with justice judge your neighbor. Do not go around spreading slander among your people, but also don't stand by idly by when your neighbor's life is at stake. I am Yahweh. Do not hate your brother in your heart, but rebuke your neighbor frankly, so that you won't carry sin because of him. Don't take vengeance on or bear a grudge against any of your people. Rather, love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. There you go. That's that command. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, might, soul, and strength. And then here's the second one right here. Love your neighbor as yourself. Observe my regulations. Don't let your livestock, let's see, go up. Don't let your livestock mate with those of another kind. Don't sow your field with two different kinds of grain, and don't wear a garment of cloth made with two different kinds of thread. Well, why? Because doing so would defraud you in the would be defrauding people in the marketplace. If you have a solid wool suit that's mixed with cotton, cotton is an inferior product, and it's cheaper. It's much cheaper to produce. So if you mix the threads of wool and cotton together in a garment, then you have cheapened that garment, but you're still telling them it's a wool garment, and you're going to try to charge them full price. You understand what I'm saying? And that was a common thing in those days. Still a common thing today.
You probably do that in China.
They do it here in America.
Yeah.
But you can wear different, a shirt and a pair of pants that are made of different materials. Right?
Yes,
As long as it's not woven together.
right. And the intent is that you don't defraud someone. If a man has sexual relations with a woman who is a slave intended for another man, she has neither been redeemed or given her freedom. There is to be an investigation. They are not to be put to death because she was not free. In reparation, he is to bring a ram as a guilt offering for himself to the entrance of the tent meeting. The Kohen will make an atonement for him with the ram and the guilt offering before Adonai for the sin he committed, and he will be forgiven for the sin he committed.
I have a question, Rabbi.
Okay?
Back to the previous verse about the food. Did it say, for example, a watermelon? Like now they have watermelon without seed. They're kind of altering the watermelon for it not to have seed, so that's not kosher. Is that correct?
That's a hard one to answer. It takes someone a lot smarter than me to figure that one out. Okay.
I just wondered about.
But
I've
its
heard people say.
appearance is against the command. Its appearance is against the command. In other words, if they're breeding cucumbers and watermelons together to get seedless watermelons, I don't know that's how they do it. I'm just saying, if.
Right.
Then that would be breaking the instructions of the Torah.
Right.
So I don't
because-
know what they're doing in order to get the seedless watermelons, so I don't know if they're breaking Torah or not.
And it seems to me like the watermelon with the seed is a lot sweeter than the one without.
It is.
You know,
Well,
just-
I will
I
tell
was
you
told
that
about the watermelon and
there are
not to
times
eat
when I
those
have
that
tried
don't have
eating
seed.
some of the seedless watermelons and they didn't taste that sweet to me.
But it has seeds, they're just edible.
Yeah. They do have seeds, they're just not hard. They didn't mature.
Yeah, they do. They have like real soft. Yeah, true.
Have
Good.
a melon growing in my stomach.
Yeah, well, don't put one in your ear. Don't put a seed in your ear. You have a watermelon growing out of your ear, you know.
Funny, hey, the one side.
Come in to one side.
Right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
That answered your question, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of one of those questions that we don't really know, right?
Right.
But don't we have fruits that are cross?
There's some fruit.
Cross-contaminated?
Well, I don't know, like,
There are some plants that God commands us not to grow near each other, okay? And it's because the cross-pollination will create a hybrid of sorts, and he doesn't like that.
And it messes up the
Like, for example, strawberries and jalapeno.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Cucumbers and watermelons, another one. You don't grow them in the same area
really?
because they will cross-pollinate and it will.
Well,
Yeah.
you have to know about
Spicy
gardening then. I thought you didn't matter.
Spicy strawberry.
I don't know why, but that this
Well, growing fruits mixed with vegetables doesn't sound right either.
Yeah, because like tomatoes, like considered a fruit.
And a vegetable, yeah.
Yeah, but tomatoes really have to be grown separately. In order for them to grow right. It takes a lot of
One day.
Well, I like
one
as
day
much as
Yeshua will
possible to
plant
get
everything.
the what do they call it? The seeds that are as close to the original as possible.
Mhm.
Heirloom, yeah.
Heirloom?
Heirloom seeds are the best.
Oh, okay.
They don't have a lot of the miracle stuff you're looking for in today's seeds and things, but you know, they're more in harmony with God's laws. When you enter the land and plant various kinds of fruit trees, you are to regard its fruit as forbidden for 3 years. It will be forbidden to you and not eaten.
You
Wow.
brought that up.
Yeah, maybe that's why our tree never put forth any more oranges, because we ate the first two.
Mm-hmm.
We
You
ate,
had to know.
we ate the first two out of it. We didn't know. And it
In-
never gave us another fruit.
Right. In the 4th year, all its fruit will be holy for praising Adonai.
Wow, how beautiful.
But in the 5th year, you may eat its fruit, so it will produce even more for you. I am Yahweh your God. Do not eat anything with blood. Do not practice divination or fortune telling. Do not round your hair at the temples or mar the edges of your beard. Don't cut gashes in your flesh, and when someone dies or tattoo yourselves, I am Yahweh.
Wow, tattoos right there, that's big time now in this generation.
Yep. Do not debase your daughter by making her a prostitute so that the land will not fall into prostitution and become full of shame. Keep my Sabbaths, plural, and revere my sanctuary. I am Yahweh. Do not turn to spirit mediums or sorcerers, and don't seek them out to be defiled by them. I am Yahweh, your God. Stand up in the presence of a person with gray hair. Show respect for the old. You are to fear your God. I am Yahweh. When I first taught this in Zion, it was so funny because I had gray hair, obviously, and whenever I would walk into the room, the whole congregation would rise, and then I'd tell them they can be seated, and then we'd go on with our service, and then we would go out to eat, and I would come out from behind a room divider or whatever, step into the room, and they would all rise. And then I would step back out, and then they would be seated, and then I'd come back again, and they'd all rise. But anyway, we were having fun with the commandments, and delighting in God's commandments.
Amen.
So stand up in the presence of a person with gray hair. Show respect for the old. You are to fear your God. I am Yahweh. If a foreigner stays with you in your land, do not do him wrong. Rather, treat the foreigner with you like the native born among you. You are to love him as yourself, for you were foreigners in the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh your God. Don't be dishonest when measuring length, weight, or capacity. Rather, be honest. Honest balanced scales, honest weights, honest bushel dry measure, and honest gallon liquid measure. I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Observe all of my regulations and rulings and do them. I am Yahweh.
What verse are you on, Mother?
That was the end of 19.
Yeah,
Oh, that was the end of 19.
last couple of verses of 19. Okay, this is chapter 20, verse 1. Yahweh said to Moses, say to the people of Israel, someone from the people of Israel or one of the foreigners living in Israel sacrifices one of his children to Molech, he must be put to death. The people of the land are to stone him to death. I too will set myself against him and cut him off from his people, because he has sacrificed his child to Molech, defiling my sanctuary and profaning my holy name. If the people of the land look the other way, when that man sacrifices his child to Molech and failed to put him to death, then I will set myself against him and his family and everyone who follows him to go fornicating after Molech and cut them off from their people. So following after Molech, God considers that fornication. The person, huh?
You know, Ruth, when she was little, and they were going to offer her to a god, right? And they had to be. Maybe I'm getting it mixed up with somebody else, but I thought of Ruth when she was being offered to a god, and she walked up, and they were sacrificing their children. And just before she went up, she got bruises on her arms, and so that disqualified her as an offering. But that wasn't her. I was just, okay.
Well, there was a movie that they put that in there.
That's in the Word.
I don't remember that. Sorry. I just don't remember it.
That was Hollywood.
That was Hollywood.
Oh, that was Hollywood. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, audience.
So the person who turns to spirit mediums and sorcerers to go fornicating after them, I will set myself against him and cut him off from his people. Therefore consecrate yourselves. You people must be holy, because I am Yahweh your God. Observe my regulations and obey them. I am Yahweh who sets you apart to be holy. A person who curses his father or his mother must be put to death, having cursed his father or his mother, and his blood is on him. If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, that is, with the wife of a fellow countryman, both the adulterer and the adulteress must be put to death. Both of them must be. The man who goes to bed with his father's wife has disgraced her father sexually. Both of them must be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man goes to bed with his daughter-in-law, both of them must be put to death. They have committed a perversion and their blood is upon them. If a man goes to bed with a man as with a woman, both of them must be put to death. They have both committed abomination and must both be put to death. Their blood is on them. If a man marries a woman and her mother, if a man marries a woman and her mother, it is depravity. They are to be put to death by fire, both he and they, so that there will not be depravity among you. If a man has sexual relations with an animal, he must be put to death. You are to kill the animal. If a woman approaches an animal and has sexual relations with it, you are to kill the woman and the animal. Their blood will be upon them. If a man takes his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and has sexual relations with her, and she consents, it is a shameful thing. They are to be cut off publicly. He has had sexual relations with her, and she consents. He has had sexual relations with his sister, and he will bear the consequences of wrongdoing. If a man goes to bed with a woman in her menstrual period and has sexual relations with her, he has exposed the source of her blood, and she has exposed the source of her blood. Both of them are to be cut off from their people. You're not to have sexual relations with your mother's sister or your father's sister. A person who does this has had sexual relations with close relative. They will bear consequences of their wrongdoing. If a man goes to bed with his uncle's wife, he has disgraced his uncle sexually. They will bear the consequences of their sin and die childless. If a man takes his brother's wife, it is uncleanness. He has disgraced his brother sexually, and they will be childless. You are to observe all my regulations and rulings and act upon them, so that the land to which I am bringing you will not vomit you out. God's serious about this, isn't he? Do not live by the regulations of the nation which I am expelling ahead of you, because they did all these things, which is why I detested them. But you, I have said to you, you will inherit their land. I will give it to you as a possession, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am Yahweh your God, who has set you apart from other people. Therefore you are to distinguish between clean and unclean animals, and between clean and unclean birds. Do not make yourself detestable with an animal, bird, reptile that I have set apart for you to regard as unclean. Rather, you people are to be holy for me, because I, Yahweh, am holy. I have set you apart from other people so that you can belong to me. A man or a woman who is a spirit medium or a sorcerer must be put to death. They are to stone them to death. Their blood will be upon them. And that's the end of this week's Torah Parsha.
A familiar spirit would be a familiar spirit would be a spirit that showed itself unto you, that came in the form of someone that you knew that has passed away. A familiar spirit. I'm not sure. I've heard
Familiar
it.
spirits are usually spirits that are familiar to the mediums who are using them. For example,
I know who. What was his name? He went to go see the witch to summon
Witch of Endor.
the witch of Endor to
Yeah.
summon
And she had her familiar spirits, and
Samuel.
Samuel talked to her, and it wasn't her familiar spirits, and it scared her to death.
Amen.
Well, very good.
Very good.
I consider the Bible study completed, and we had another good time tonight.
Your wife has a question.
What?
May I ask one more question?
How much money do you have?
I got the same money you do.
I kind of need to take a break. So
Okay.
I'm at a quitting point here. So thank you all for putting up with me. So I guess that's it until next Tuesday, and we'll have our normal Sabbath service this coming Sabbath morning. Well, shalom, everyone, and may God go with you and bless you. And until then, shalom havarim. Amen.
Amen.
All righty.
Thank you for joining us this evening for another delightful Torah study. We will have another service this coming Shabbat. That's Saturday morning, beginning with our 10 a.m. Bibles Issues class, followed by our 11 a.m. main service with liturgy, worship, and a teaching. We hope to see you again, and if you have any questions or comments, please direct them to asktherabbi@tzion.org. And for further information, you can visit our website at tzion.org. Give us a thumbs up if you like, and subscribe. Thank you. Shalom, shalom.